This conference will now be recorded.
I'd like to call the Finance and Personnel Committee for Tuesday, June 16th, 2020 to order. Roll call, please.
Mark Williams.
Here.
Mike Malczewski is excused. Tom Selk.
Here.
Okay. Chris Zerbel is excused. Allison Brunette. Here.
Quorum, please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible,
For the injustice for
Delay.
Just a little delay. Need a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
second.
All in favor, please say aye.
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 Action on the minutes from the Finance and Personnel Committee regular meeting, May 19th, 2020.
Make a
I
motion
move we
to
approve.
Take that as a motion and a second right there. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Comments from the public. Anybody here that want to speak to anything that's not on the agenda? Everybody looks like they're here for the agenda items, so we'll move on right away to action items. 7A, action on request for captain's promotions. Chief.
Okay, I don't want to, reiterate too much what I already explained on the green sheet, but what I'm looking to do is instill captains in the command structure. We have 9 lieutenants right now. 3 of them are given a title of lead lieutenants. But what I'd like to do is instill a more formal command structure of captains and get rid of 3 lieutenants currently staffed. As I mentioned, this would give me a better continuity of command, would allow me to be able to run the shifts a little more efficiently, give folks in the department an idea of who to go to with any kind of issues, command structures, that type of thing. As I mentioned, this was recommended by Fitch in part of their analysis of the public safety department. I also would like to reincorporate the captain of lieutenants. I think this is a position as well that the scope of command is quite large. It's 8 people, although some of them don't necessarily full-time, but they are under the scope of authority of the investigative lieutenant at this point, and he doesn't have an assistant like the other shifts. They have 2 lieutenants to help out. He's kind of by himself in that regard. So it also gives me a better opportunity to interchange captains if I want to. The advantage of that would be to rotate captains throughout the investigative bureau to gain more knowledge, also help with the overall continuity of the department. So with that, I'm looking for a recommendation for those positions. Obviously, like I said, there is a cost involved. I've received a couple different estimates on what the total costs are going to be, but it's going to be somewhere $30,000 mark. Are there opportunities to save money elsewhere in the budget? Maybe. One of the big glaring things that I see right now operationally is our overtime expenditure, and how can I reduce that? I think there are opportunities there to reduce it by that amount or quite a bit more, depending on how we do things within the department. So with that, I will entertain any questions that you folks might have, and I'm not sure if that was somebody trying to chime in on that, or is that just static? Okay.
Staffing requests and everything in the past, we've always taken at budget time. That's my only concern on this. I don't know how we would handle it internally right now with everything up in the air. That's my biggest concern with it. I don't have a problem with it, what you've explained and everything. Mm-hmm. Does Police and Fire, have they taken a look at it?
Yep, they've already approved the positions. The biggest thing that I will tell you right now, based on everything that has happened, is we're obviously our overtime budget is considerably less based on the amount of activities that haven't taken place, so there's money there. We've saved money in the positions that have gone unfilled throughout the year, so the money's within the budget. It just depends on, like you said, on the timing thing. I would like to get it implemented as soon as possible to help the continuity of the department and move along with the process of that. So,
just to clarify on the role of the PFC, the Police and Fire Commission, they just promote. They can't create the overall structure. So the village has to approve the organizational structure and fund that structure. That's why it has to come here and through village board. And then he would have to go back to Police and Fire Commission to actually do the promotions. So they don't really have authority over that part of it.
The 4 captains are 1 for each shift plus lieutenant. I mean, for
investigations. Correct.
And you would have money currently, but our concern is what happens in 2021, because we'll have a funding gap next year for sure. Just because of COVID with reduced room tax revenues, state shared aids will drop by 5% in all likelihood for next year. At least that's what they're telling us to project. So we will have a budget problem for sure.
with all the other lieutenants that are on board right now. Put them
Well,
back.
the current lieutenants would stay as they are, and then there would be a promotion of 3 lieutenants into the captain's positions. Or 4 lieutenants, I should say, with investigations.
So you'd have the captains, and then you'd still have
6 lieutenants.
2 lieutenants per shift?
Correct.
I understand that piece. The point I am needing a little bit more clarification on relates to, you state lower in the paragraph about how there'd be the flexibility to offer additional training by reassigning staff to that captain role. So it is a promotion permanently, it sounds like, for 3 individuals, and then there's the opportunity to re-up those assignments with different individuals and kind of rotate. So it's not like a permanent promotion, or it's a temporary assignment as captain?
It would be a permanent promotion to captains. What I was talking about with rotating them around would be, if I included the investigations position as well, I could rotate them all through that if I wanted to give them more opportunity, more experience, just be a more well-rounded captain in that regard. So that just makes it easier. Otherwise, I can't. If you're a lieutenant of investigations, there's challenges involved with that when you're trying to control scenes and dealing with captains. There's always a chain of command that could come up, and there's a struggle internally with that regard. And I think that the scope of command for the lieutenant of investigations qualifies it to be a captain's position. But I think that we would be not as efficient as we could be if that was not a captain's position.
Will there be additional training criteria that someone with that captain status would need to maintain in the future, like incident command, additional training, or is it going to be an interview process of existing lieutenants, possibly open to new individuals, to reclassify people from lieutenant to captain?
Yeah, I mean, I talked to the POC a little bit about the interview process and how that would go. I'm not going to get any additional candidates. They are what they are. And they kind of agreed with me that just the commander process that we went through would be sufficient to pick the captains out of that process.
Thank you.
Tom, you got any questions?
Nope. It seems like this year's not a problem. It's like Allison said, in future years it may be a problem, but we'll deal with the future years and future years. It seems like this is the way to go. If Fitch said that that's the way to go, it certainly seems like it makes sense. Why not? Why do the study if we're not going to follow their recommendations?
No, like I said, my only issue is the budget part of it. I mean, I don't have a problem in moving this on to village board, I guess, next week and let them see what they say, but they're the ones that have to decide on how this budget's gonna go, so.
I would share those thoughts, that while I think it's sound and the logic behind it makes a lot of sense logistically, that this should perhaps wait until budget decisions, and later this year we'll also have a greater sense of the impact of COVID on this year's budget and beyond.
Someone wanna make a motion on this, or what do you wanna do?
Would it be just a motion to forward this on to the board with our comments and thoughts? Or are we taking an action item to approve?
Well, we are,
It's noted as
Approving the
recommendation
concept.
approve.
right, approving the concept and forwarding it on to village board for their approval, I guess.
It sounds like two of the three of us, though, would prefer that motion be made with a time constraint on it. I mean, could we make that motion in that language?
Sure.
I would make a motion that, we approve this and recommend that village board reconsider during the budget cycle.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion to second. Any other discussion? All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
All right.
Motion passes 3-0. Thank you. Move on to 7B, action on request for facility therapy dog.
Okay, I have Tammy Nicholson here and Jeff Everett, who would be in charge of the program. This has been brought before you, well, not necessarily you, but the village board back last May, and it was approved, but we should probably talk a little bit more about the costs involved. I just wanted to provide some transparency on what those actual costs were. It sounds like in talking with Jeff that these funds would be accounted for through donations that they have right now. The only thing that wasn't necessarily maybe talked about last time was the vehicle involved and how that would incorporate into this program, and what type of vehicle that would be. It doesn't sound like it's going to be something that is overly complicated. It just needs a platform in it, and that the current SRO vehicle maybe could be rotated out at some point and be allowed to be used in this capacity. So I'm happy to allow Jeff and Tammy to talk a little bit about the program and the benefits of this for the school district and for the community as well. So
this is a program I looked at shortly after becoming a school resource officer. I was looking for different ways to help with situations where kids were having an emotional or behavioral outburst. A lot of times what it ends up having to do is we have to clear a classroom out, and we try to verbally talk that student down to de-escalate the situation. There's times that doesn't work, and it goes up to a point where it's actual physical contact, where maybe we have to use a restraint on the student. And then when that happens, obviously we have to clear the classroom out, so it disrupts the learning for all the students in that classroom. There's a chance of injury to the student or the officer involved when we have to do a restraint on the student. So when I did some research on this, I came across an officer in Menasha, Officer Jeff Jorgensen. He looked at this. His main focus at that point in time when he got the program going by him was for restraint purposes, and that's what he wanted, a reduction in his restraints. He saw in 3 years, he saw an 85% reduction in restraints with the implementation of this program. How that benefits is a lot of times these kids, they'll have indicators that you know that things are happening with them, and it's more than likely going to escalate up to a point where it's going to be something physical. So when we initially get called there, I'm a police officer. They see me as a police officer. This is my school resource officer uniform, but we're still an authoritative figure, and a lot of times there's some underlying reason why these students, these children don't trust police officers or somebody in power. So with that dog, what it does is it gives it a non-verbal, non-judgmental approach to that situation, where you can just walk in with the dog, they can start petting the dog, talking with the dog, and before you know it, the situation's resolved to a point where we're able to at least walk the student out of that room, and then talk to him a little further, to him or her a little further, and then get them back to a state where they're ready for learning again. Jeff Jorgensen saw that with one particular student he had. A lot of times it was over an hour and a half before he was able to get that situation resolved, to get that student back into that classroom. What he does now with that student is he'll walk up to the classroom, he'll hand the leash off. That's Officer Geller is the dog. He'll hand Geller's leash off to that student, and they'll walk around the school to check the doors to make sure they're locked. He said, before I'm halfway around the school, the kid opens up to me and tells me what's going on, maybe something happened at home, maybe didn't have food that day or something like that. So that trust level is built a lot quicker through that platform, through that format. So he saw great success in that. I talked to some other officers. Another way we could use it is just to kind of bridge that gap between law enforcement and students, because again, they just see us as an authoritative figure. A lot of times the interaction, like I'm at the high school, and a lot of times the interaction they have with an officer is usually negative. I'm out in the hallway, usually at the end of the school days, let the kids pass by, just to be visual, so they can see me out there, and hopefully they'll stop and talk with me. A lot of times they don't, again, because I'm an officer. Wausau, what they saw since they got their dog is kids are stopping constantly, talking with them. They'll come into his office throughout the school day and just start talking with them. So he has a better idea of what's going on in the school day and with the students and things. So I see a great need with that, especially the mental health aspect of it. I anticipate, because of COVID, when students do resume school again, a lot of those relationships that I've built with these students are lost, are behind a lot. And I think there's a lot of them struggling now with mental health issues, and I think this is going to be an excellent tool to be able to help them cope and get back into their routines again.
I hate when everything comes down to money, but this is just a matter of what we're doing at finance here right now. With I understand what the program is, and when I heard it before, I mean, I know that the school district is in some uncertainty too, so, you know, as far as how it's going to happen and budgeting and everything. So, I mean, that's my main concern again on here. So, I mean, especially with coming from donations, I mean, if it doesn't, I mean, we have to fund it. We have to fund it.
We are, as a school district, very supportive of this, and we have been trying to get this up and running for 2 years now. We have enough donations and support for this upcoming year to get this going. I fully anticipate we will continue to have that. We have an organization in the community, a business willing to donate food. We have another vet clinic willing to provide everything at cost for us. So both Jeff and I are very passionate about this, and we plan to, if things fall short, we will be fundraising as much as we can to make this happen, and looking at other donors that are out there that are willing to do this. We've had people step up saying, when you get this going, let me know, I can donate some funds for this. So I don't see that as an issue. I truly don't see that as an issue. Now, obviously it could be, but at this point, I anticipate that we should be able to cover the costs for this.
We have funds through 21 now, once we start this?
Yeah.
So 22 would be?
My goal is to be able to fundraise enough for the initial startup of the program and operational costs for first year. So then we won't look at it as a budgeted item until 2022. So
what, if you get the dog, if this gets approved through the village board and everything in the school district, how long before you actually get a dog?
I'm in contact with the kennel, and they're out of Iron Ridge, Wisconsin. He says a 12-week program. So as soon as he gets the okay and we get the funds to be able to pay for the dog, then he'll do his 12-week training, and then I'll go down for the 2 weeks of training, and then it'll be ready to implement. What's nice about that program is they're right down the road, a few hours down the road. And he had said that if we have any issues, either I can go down by him or he can come up by me for a day to kind of work out any issues we're having.
So they got pups there now?
He recommends getting a dog that's at least 18 months old. He said that the issue with the puppies are they're puppies. You can train them really well, but they're still going to have that puppy in them, and they tend to want to just play like a puppy does, and you don't want to do that when you're working with the students who may have a mental health issue or something like that. So he recommends 18 to 24 months old for the dog.
What kind of dog?
It would more than likely be a Labrador. Seems to be the best temperament for this type of dog.
I think this sounds like an amazing program. It would be such an asset to have in the schools. I also think, too, because it would be in the school, there'd be perhaps a little bit more heartfelt attachment and fundraising efforts. I know in the community I work in, we raised $60,000 in a matter of a year toward a canine, and that's not exclusively in schools. So it seems like communities really do rally around, you know, youth, animals. So I'm confident you guys would be able to raise the funds. The one area I did have a question on was, I note that you will not have an official canine vehicle until 2022, and that rotates out. Now, I'm asking because I don't know, don't canine vehicles have special protective alarm systems in case the air conditioning were to turn off? You know, there was that horrible incident a few years ago where the dog passed in the car because of heat. Would the SRO vehicle be equipped with that feature, or is that budgeted?
Initially, it would not be, but what's different with this is it's not a patrol dog. So it would come into the facilities with me at the schools, and if there was a situation where I had to go to crisis center or maybe transport a student to Brown County Mental Health Center, that dog would be left with the staff at that facility. There's no special training for the dog as far as taking over care of them while I'm tied up doing that stuff. At the high school and the middle school, I'll have a kennel in at each facility in my office. So if I weren't to make it back to the school in time before the school closed, staff would be able to secure the dog in the kennel at that time. So the dog would never be left in a vehicle. Even when I get called to the school for a crisis situation, if I don't have time to drop the dog off in my office, I would just hand off to the office staff because I have to go to the office when I enter the school anyway.
We talked about a backup plan as well, that either Kurt, Keith, or myself would be a backup to administration. So if he had to leave the dog, the administration would be alerted. They'd let us know, so we're a backup to them. Because obviously we don't want anybody staying extra hours on a Friday or something like that, and then we would be able to take care of that.
If you basically split the duties at Parkview and the high school, what about the elementary schools?
So Officer Dunlap, she's assigned to elementary schools. I'm assigned to the high school, and then we split the middle school. We spend a majority of our time at the middle school, and it's just that age group for some reason. But I do assist Officer Dunlap in the other schools as well. So if there's a situation where a student is getting physical, it always involves two officers. So then if something's going on at the high school or the middle school, then I'll contact Officer Dunlap to help me, and vice versa. So the vision is to have the dog available for all the schools.
So the elementaries don't have the need as much as...
Probably not the need is in the fact of like the emotional behavioral outbursts. They do have that, but not probably to the extent that the other schools do have. But there's also other programs that you can utilize the dog for. A reading program is a good one too. A lot of times students, they're apprehensive to read out loud. And it's a great way to build relationships with an officer and students, to be able to go into the classroom and have the student read to the dog, and it just kind of eases tension and the student's learning. So
The dog gets something out of it too.
yeah, exactly.
We were able to go to Menasha and follow the Officer Jorgensen, correct? And it was very, very eye-opening to watch it, because he went into an elementary school where there was a little boy, I believe about second grade, who was having an issue, and he just walked in and he said, would you like to read to...
You want Geller? You want to read the cat book to Geller?
Yeah, so the dog actually went and got the book, brought the book into the room where he was, and he read the book and calmed down and was able to turn it around right away and go back. And it was just amazing how the lack of words from adults really just impacted him, was sitting with this animal that was non-judgmental, didn't say anything, and just gave him that time to calm down. So it was pretty powerful to see that. And we've heard many, many reports of that. And like anyone who has a pet knows, there's just something very nurturing about having an animal that doesn't speak back sometimes, and will listen and be there for any situation.
What I liked is, you said an 85 or 80% reduction in restraint, which is wonderful, and that's a very good benefit. And I think with this COVID, and a lot of children missed an opportunity to get special counseling during this COVID situation. And I think there's going to be more problems next year because of that. And I think this is a good program to help that. So I'm very much in favor of this. I think it's a great idea.
Is there a special committee fundraising for this effort, like the Canine Committee, or, I know it's not a canine, but...
No, just as of right now, I reached out to a couple entities through the school. I know some booster clubs that I spoke with. Ashwaubenon Education Foundation had a grant out there. That time had passed, so that's another one next year we could possibly apply for. It's up to a $2,000 grant. So right now it's just Tammy and myself are just kind of brainstorming. I met with student council at the middle school, just to kind of fill them in on the program. This was earlier this spring. They're very excited. They're getting together and starting some of their own ideas for fundraising. I didn't have an opportunity to speak with the student council at the high school because of COVID. But again, I spoke to a couple of the teachers that are involved with the student council up there, and they said these kids would just be just over ecstatic to be able to fundraise for this cause.
I'll make a motion to approve the expenditure.
Second.
Facility therapy dog. Do we want a dollar amount under?
I think you're really authorizing the fundraising is really what would be the purchase and fundraising for it, because they're saying it's not a budgetary impact for this year, next year.
So moved.
Second.
Okay. And forward it to village board. And the school board have to go through it too?
We already approved it at a previous board meeting, so it's been approved. We're very excited to get going with it.
Okay, we got a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, motion passes. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
7C, action on cultural competency training.
Okay, as part of my duties, obviously, the information that I've gone through and evaluation of the department, one of the areas that I would like to touch on is cultural competency training. In evaluating, talking to our training instructor, it looks like this is an area that hasn't been touched on for some time. So I wanted to bring this to your attention and possibly the board to decide if this is something we want to take action on right away. What kind of need do we want to place on this as far as expediency goes? As you know, and as I outlined, this is not a budget item that was taking place this year. Most of our training budget has already been accounted for the remainder of the year. So with that being said, obviously this training I feel is very important. It would train our officers on different aspects of cultures, how to relate with them, how to understand them, talk about implicit bias and how we bring our own biases maybe subconsciously into our contacts with the community, and what we can do to learn from that. So I guess my question for you guys is since this is not a budget item for our training budget is spoken for, is this something that I want to look at now as training our officers? And how do I incorporate that? How do I do that? Obviously, the Northeast Wisconsin Technical is offering a class. I don't know what other classes are out there, what type of options I have to train. I don't know what kind of information that we have as far as online training. What other ways are there to incorporate this training and not bear the expense of what this costs, which is over $27,000, including overtime? I do think that there is a need for this. I think that we need to work in this direction, but how we go about that, I'm looking for input from you guys on what you think might be the best way to do that, taking into account budgetary constraints in that regard. So that's why I bring this to your attention, just to let you know that this is a shortfall in the training that hasn't happened here in quite some time, and we need to address this at some point. When that is, that's kind of when we need to decide to maybe brainstorm among us and the board to figure out when that would be.
When you say quite some time, when was the last time that a training?
Nobody knows.
Okay.
So.
Well, I just first of all want to commend you for bringing this forward. I was really pleased to see this in the packet. This is obviously something that is on a lot of people's minds right now watching the news, and I think that all organizations should challenge themselves to lean into this topic and have difficult conversations and reflect on our own bias. And it's not a reflection on us being inherently bad people. It's a reflection that, you know, we live in a predominantly white community and we don't maybe understand implicit bias or think through the way our bias sometimes affects the way we do our jobs. And I think that we owe this to our citizens to have the most competent, well-trained organization, but also law enforcement agency. I would like to support this, but I'd also like to see a commitment that this be an ongoing training, that this isn't just a one-time session that's attended. I'd like to see efforts of some sort to continue to have these conversations on an ongoing basis and see them happen. I know we're just talking about this department right now, but see this type of training conversation happen organization-wide, not just focus this as exclusively a law enforcement topic. Our entire organization should be well-grounded in cultural competency, not just law enforcement.
Have we talked about that, Allison or Mary, at all for everybody?
We have not. We can certainly look at that. Brian and I have kind of focused more on trying to find some other alternatives to doing this. I have at least one name that we kind of really like to be able to explore of how we could do it in a more cost-effective way. Obviously, with our general employees, it's a little bit easier to get somebody in and get them trained without the overtime costs. But we also think that there might be a way to, if it's a videotape type thing for, at least do it live one time and bring somebody in and then tape them and do it for the next one. So I think we really just need to explore that and kind of get everybody through that.
I like your comments as far as having it, not just for public safety. I think that it is something that we have to look at. We all deal with culture diversity and everything else that goes along with it, and you just, if it's, just, village-wide, or at least in here, that we can offer it. I'd like to explore some of those options, I guess, to get everybody to have it.
Yeah. And although we are a predominantly white community, we have, like I was telling the news, we have the Packers here, right? So we have lots of people coming into our community at various times throughout the year. And so there, I think there is an opportunity for us to learn, to be better, and to understand how, like I said, how our biases may impact how we police, but also to understand different cultures that we come in contact with on a daily basis.
Is there any way you can reshuffle some of the training and move this forward, ahead of other training?
Well, that's a good question, because a lot of our training budget is just eaten up by mandated training by the state. And so, when you have a public safety department that incorporates all three disciplines, we're required to do training for police, fire, and EMS on that aspect. So we use up a lot of it just by the mandated training that we have. Our training budget right now only gives us about, $500 per officer or something like that, if we talk about splitting up the entire pot. It's tough for us to do that and incorporate this type of training along with the mandated training. So when you're talking about training 51 officers, that just isn't cheap to do, especially in-person stuff. So if you want to talk about trying to find other ways to do it, yes, we can do that. Is that going to be as effective and as good? I don't know. All the online learning, some people can handle that, some people can't. So we have to figure out what's going to be best for us. And as you said, look at ongoing training.
I'm curious, and obviously this might not be something you know off the top of your head, but if the corporate conference center at NWTC is planning on offering this next year, if we could send half of staff this year, the other half in 2021, just to feel a little bit less of that budgetary impact this year, but still have the overall goal achieved within one calendar year of having the entire department trained.
I think it's a good idea, and we even threw around the idea of just sending the supervisors initially type of training. But again, it's going to take a process to do that, and I kind of wanted to get some input on what you guys felt as you're not and getting this training up and running.
Well, my thought is, we got some time on some of these classes that are on this class dates right now.
Yeah.
It behoove us to, approve the cultural competency training, but look for alternative ways of trying to train everybody cost effectively.
Meeting the goal, but not necessarily through this exact program.
Right.
Well, the July one comes up within a month of our next meeting.
I'm just throwing ideas out here right now, but
yeah, there are obviously different organizations that put on this training and different types of training as well, and so it's really kind of incumbent on us to figure out what type of training we want to have, how many people we want to send, how does that fit within our budget? Because quite honestly, this year, none of it. Figure out, okay, what can we do to start incorporating this type of training to educate our officers to be better at doing our jobs.
Well, and see, I really struggle with the idea that we should forego really important training because it's not in the budget, because is it a self-fulfilling prophecy, like what you just said, that no one can remember the last time a training like this happened? If we always say, oh, it's not in the budget, it's not in the budget, are we actually holding ourselves back from challenging ourselves and training in an area that's becoming more and more relevant?
Well, in this year, like Allison said, there's probably some money in the budget that we can work with based on the things that haven't happened, the events that haven't happened with overtime, the positions have, and that's what I wanted to talk about in the captains as well. But if we're going to train, this might be the year to do that, because there is some money there. Obviously, it's going to depend on what happens the rest of the year. You can never predict that. And so that's why I wanted to get input from you guys on how we should go about doing this, because it wasn't budgeted for, obviously.
I guess what I would like to see would be kind of see brought back a blended model where we definitely see department leadership, and I'll, leave the definition of how many people are included in leadership up to you guys. Leadership attend this training, particularly since it is right in our backyard and because it is geared towards law enforcement professionals. As far as the rest of the organization, I'd love to see if there's opportunities for either remote or in-person training where maybe there's 3 cohorts of the entire organization. So 1/3 of the organization does it on this day. That way we're not wholly burdening law enforcement with the overtime expenditures. But I think it's also important to not put law enforcement on an island all by itself and say, well, you guys, you really need this. The rest of us will get to it when we get to it. Everybody needs this. And I think it would actually be very valuable to the conversations to have them take place with law enforcement and the rest of the organization in the same room, because I think that individuals in law enforcement bring a unique perspective different from what many other municipal staff members have, a different experience. And I think that everybody could stand to learn from hearing one another. So I'd love to see this specific training taken advantage of by leadership, but then explore what models there might be and what costs they might come out in-person training for the entire organization and law enforcement involved in those same trainings.
Is that a motion?
Did you get that, Susie?
I agree. I think this is, because it's geared to public safety and police, I think this would be more valuable than any other training you could get. And I think you could squeeze it in somewhere. And I guess I agree. Maybe get some of the people involved this year and move it on to next year, some of it. But I think what's going to be a good value is the community. You can promote this in the community. Hey, this is the training we're going through to help our officers. I think that, with the situation nationally, this would be a good PR thing.
I was semi-serious on that.
Let me try and distill that down. I'll make a motion to approve leadership from the police department attending a training through NWTC on one of these 3 dates this year, and ask that municipal administration look to in-person or remote training opportunities for the entire staff on this topic.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, that was I think that's a good point for everybody to have it anyway, so I'm glad that we talked this through. Okay, items for next agenda. Anybody have anything?
Tom had asked for the clerk ordinance, so the village attorney has that after our last meeting. He just must not have it done, so hopefully that will show up shortly.
Yeah, put it on the agenda again.
Okay. If you have anything else, just contact staff here, myself, we'll get it on there for you. Need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much.